Okay, so we'll be moving on to constructing and assembling. So throughout history, the major sculpting techniques in the West were modeling, carving, and casting. And in the 20th century, assembling methods became popular. So it's kind of a more modern technique, I guess. And in this technique, it's when the artist puts together pieces that they have shaped themselves, and the result is called a construction. And then sculptures built from found objects are called an assemblage. So in the 1920s, Spaniard Julio Gonzalez pioneered the use of the welding torch for cutting welding metal sculpture, for cutting and welding metal sculpture. And so welding had been invented in 1895, but it took 3 decades for artists to use the new tool for sculpture, for metal sculpture. And Gonzalez had learned welding while working in an automotive factory. And he actually started off as a painter, but just wasn't very successful with that. And then he began to assist Picasso with the construction of metal sculpture. And then he ended up doing his own sculpture eventually after working with Picasso. And in 1932, he wrote, "The age of iron began many centuries ago by producing very beautiful objects, unfortunately mostly weapons. Today it makes possible bridges and railroads as well. And it is the time material ceased to be a murderer and the simple instrument of an overly mechanical science. The door is wide open at last, for this material can be forged and hammered by the peaceful hands of artists." So that's one of his things that he talked about, or one of his quotes that the book talked about. We're going to look at maternity. It kind of has an airy, playful, and feminine shape. It's made from steel, and then it has some stone here at the bottom that it's kind of embedded in, helps it to stand. From 1934. And he welded flexed iron rods to create this. And it's, yeah, like I said, it's airy because it has, lots of areas of, I would say, negative space. A lot of open form here. This is kind of an open form because it's not closed there. So there's that. We'll move on. So we're going to talk about Phillida Barlow, and she kind of makes these constructions out of a lot of different pieces of material, and they fill the gallery up to the point of obstruction. So this piece here, it's kind of got a weird title, Untitled, Stilted Crates, 2015. She puts it all together, no spaces. Timber, polyurethane foam, cement, steel, plywood, plastic, paint, hardboard, and it's done in 8 parts. So there's probably 8 of these pieces. And she uses carpentry to create these constructions that really fill the gallery up to where you can hardly even walk through. And they seem kind of dangerous to approach, and they're really top-heavy with these big crates that are on top of these stilts. And it looks like they're about ready to fall over, really. And they kind of resemble a spider. And like I said, they look unsteady, but they actually are carefully engineered and quite safe. And they appear dangerous, but actually are not. Let's see, moving on. Mark Andre Robinson, Throne for the Greatest Rapper of All Time. So he actually goes to thrift stores and finds old furniture, and then he kind of deconstructs that furniture to create new furniture. And this one he made a throne for the greatest rapper of all time from found materials at the thrift store, different pieces of furniture that he took apart, put back together. It's actually pretty cool looking. And the purpose of this throne is to dignify whoever sits in it. And this throne is kind of a higher form of a chair, made mostly from chairs. And he has kind of a really high back to it. And then sort of like, I think this is the back here, maybe. It's kind of in several different pieces, but goes all the way up to here. And then he kind of added these elaborate wings. They appear to be almost like wings. And then, I don't know if this is an armrest, but that also comes out here. So a pretty interesting piece of furniture, really. So the book actually kind of goes over Martin Puryear a little bit. He really enjoyed working in 3D because he enjoyed all the spatial possibilities and multiple views. He studied art at the Catholic University of America, and then he served in the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone, which is in Africa. And he really admired the woodworkers there because they were very resourceful and skillful. And many of the objects that they made, they just thought of them as tools. But when Martin Puryear looked at these tools, he thought these are pieces of art. And so that really influenced him when he was in Africa. And then he attended the Swedish Royal Academy of Art in Stockholm, and he studied printmaking there. And then he apprenticed himself in a private studio of a master woodworker there. And that's how he really got into woodworking. And there's a lot of respect for craft found in his pieces. Probably because he watched the crafted objects from Africa, and then he also was actually apprenticed to a master woodworker. So if we look at this piece, Hominid, from 2007, it's made out of eastern white pine. It's very large. It's 73 by 77 by 57 inches. And it's in his studio right now, but it's called Hominid, and a hominid is a pre-human primate halfway between chimp and man. And the work is kind of an irregular polygonal block on wooden rollers. And it stands more than 6 feet tall. And he did use advanced woodworking techniques when assembling this piece. So he used, joining, finishing. And so you may not notice that when you first look at this, but if you were to get close to it, you'd realize how much craftsmanship and how much skill actually went into this piece. And he, basically with the meaning of his pieces, he likes to have various possible meanings for the viewer. It's more interesting for him that way. It's one of the characteristics of his work. He creates sculptures that create kind of an absorbing mix of possibilities in the mind as far as what it could mean. And then the time it takes for viewers to sense and then weigh possible meanings is actually the key moment for actually appreciating his work. Because it's a big part of his work is kind of wondering what his pieces mean. Let me check and see how much time I have on this. Okay. Still doing pretty decently. I'll keep moving forward. So we're going to go into kinetic sculpture now, and that's sculpture that moves. And we've actually kind of touched on this when we talked about movement in art, actual movement, and kinetic sculpture is obviously, it moves. And Alexander Calder was among the first to explore the possibilities of kinetic sculpture. And sculptors usually traditionally focus on mass, but in Calder's work, its focus is on shape, space, and movement. And his works are often called mobiles because they're suspended parts that move with the air currents, much like a child's mobile. And actually there's one in Brockman that is super similar to a lot of Calder's work. I feel like the artist that made that probably was emulating Calder's work. So we'll take a look. Here's one of Calder's kinetic sculptures. It's a mobile, and all of these move separately. Obviously, if you're in a room, it's not going to move around, but if you put this outside, it would move around in the air. And his mobiles are kind of massive and exuberant, and he paints them a lot of the time so that they end up, primary colors typically. But we're going to look at Jesus Rafael Soto. Hurtado writing from 1975. So it's made out with paint, wire, nylon cord, and wood. It's fairly large, 40 inches, 68 inches by 18 inches. And basically it's kind of a curved wire that is kind of sways in the air, and it is kind of set up against a backdrop of a painted surface that's painted with thin vertical stripes. And the wire pieces kind of resemble the strokes of handwriting, which the title kind of talks about a little bit, Hurtado writing. And the motion makes the background kind of seem to vibrate. So that's Jesus Rafael Soto. We're going to go on to Jean Tinguli. I'm not sure how to say his name. Yeah. We're going to talk about this piece, Meta Harmony 2, 1979. And it's basically mobile scrap iron sculpture with musical instruments and objects, other objects, iron, sheet metal, brass, plastic, rubber, wood, leather, glass, and electric motor. So this piece is actually kind of interesting because it uses mixed media and a long list of materials. And it includes, let's see, sorry. So the way that this is activated, it does move, but you have to step on a floor pedal, which you can actually see right here. And once you step on that, the rotators start to move, the whole thing starts to move, and then it begins to like hit gongs and drums, and then like abrasive surfaces are rubbed against to make sound. And there's even a piano somewhere in there, I think it's right here, that ends up getting played. And so kind of a cacophony of sound is created. So not only does this sculpture move, but it also makes sound. So we'll take a, oops, sorry guys. So we'll take a quick look at this. Just kind of wanted to see myself what this sounded like, what it looked like when it was moving, that kind of thing. So I think at some point they had to restore it because it was done in '79. So you can see there's a drum down there in the middle and the piano on the left.
After 38 years of operation, Meta Harmony 2 was switched off in late March 2017.
So they actually
sculpture was
tried to redo it so that it's, keeps moving, keeps working. But that's basically what it looked like when it was actually in use. Oh wait, let me see how much time I have left. A couple minutes. All right. So mixed media is a variety of media in a single work. And sometimes there's a long list of materials, or they might actually just be identified as a mixed media. And it can include found objects. And if they are found objects, they're called an assemblage. And it can, like mixed media work, can include 2- or 3-dimensional elements. And usually the choice of media expresses some cultural or symbolic meaning. So this piece that we'll go over in the next video, I think. I just don't think that there's enough time for me to go over this in this video. We'll start up again here in a minute.